Hello again. As you know, I am Eli the Computer Guy, and today's class is Introduction to Windows Server 2012. So this is the introductory class in the Windows Server 2012 track. So in this class, I'm just going to be explaining some of the basic concepts that you have to know in order to start using and administering Windows Server 2012. Now I have to say, after playing with it for a while, there are some very, very good things about Windows Server 2012 and some things that really are a pain in the butt. And this may be shocking to you, this may be surprising to you, but the biggest pain in the butt with Windows Server 2012 is, in fact, the user interface might just be worse than Windows 8. Surprisingly, shockingly, I don't know how they did it, but they actually made a server interface that is more confusing than Windows 8. Once you can get past the user interface, though, it is a very good, robust, and functional server operating system, and it is something that you should be looking at to learn and deploy into your companies or organizations. Now, the one thing that I will tell you is that Microsoft gets a bad rap for their client operating systems. Windows 95, A, B, C, D, and E. Windows 98, Windows 98 Second Edition, Windows Millennium, so on and so forth. Their client operating systems can be a bit of a nightmare. But I will tell you, having dealt with Windows servers over the years, Windows servers are genuinely very, very good things. The last time I had a big problem with Windows servers was all the way back with Windows NT 4.0, almost 13 years ago now. And even those were very manageable. Many of the problems that people complained about really weren't quite as bad as it was made out to be. But once they went to Windows 2000, once they went to Active Directory, once things got more stable within the server operating system environment, I have found Windows servers are generally good things. Yes, you do have to spend money for the server operating system and for client access licenses, so on and so forth, but if you're willing to spend the money, using Windows servers are a very good way to go. So when I'm doing this track, just so you guys know, so that you have reading material you can follow along with, I am using the Windows 2012 Unleashed by SAMS. So SAMS is a very good vendor of books. They're just like, you know, they're about the quality of dummies, only a little more sophisticated, more complicated. But I have used SAMS a lot to learn things as I go, and so that is what I am using for this track. Again, I know a lot of you guys try to be cheap. You try to do everything, you know, without spending any money. But if you're going to learn technology, you do have to spend some money. This book, I personally got at Barnes & Noble, you know, support brick and mortar stores, and it cost me $60. But again, the $60 is going to teach you about all you need for most situations for Windows 2012 servers, so I would say that you should get it. Now, when you go and you're going to learn Windows 2012, one of the things that you're going to be worried about, you're going to be like, Eli, I mean, you know, I can spend $60 for a book, but what about server hardware? You know, what about the operating system? I don't have enough money for all of that. Well, the nice part with Microsoft is that they do have 180-day trials of the Windows 2012 server operating system. So these are fully functional trials. Active Directory works, security policies work, organizational units work, VPN works, all that stuff works. It is just limited to 180-day usage. So what is very nice with these trials is you can create massive computer labs doing everything that Windows Server will do, and it will work. It'll work for you. There's no problem. You don't have to spend any money for that. As far as hardware goes, because I know a lot of you guys get really worried about server hardware. You're like, Eli, server hardware, what are we going to do? Well, with the 2012 server, you don't need very much hardware in order for it to work. It will work off a couple of year old computers. Honestly, my little computer lab, I am using these crappy 3-year-old Gateway laptops that I have been using for quite a while now. They've got 4 gigs of RAM, they've got a dual-core AMD processor, they have 500 gig hard drives, and they truck along with Windows 2012 server absolutely a-okay. So you don't need to go out and buy some expensive $3,000 piece of hardware in order to run this server operating system. You can use a desktop computer that you've had collecting dust. That will be okay for you. The only issue tiny issue that I've seen so far is with my laptop computers, Windows 2012 Server does detect all the hardware and does install drivers for all the hardware, but it installs for some of the hardware generic drivers, so there are not actually Windows 8 or Windows 2012 Server drivers that I can download from the vendor. So one of the issues that I have is things like the video card on my laptop computers. There's not the specific proprietary driver from Gateway for Windows 8 or Windows 2012, so the resolution is not crystal clear, perfect like it should be. But that's the only issue that I've seen so far with using Windows 2012 on crappy old computers, is that you may have some of these generic driver issues, and you know, it's a test system, really. Who cares at the end of the day? So when you go and you're going to be using Windows 2012 Server, one of the big warnings that I do have to give you, though, is that this is the first server operating system that is only 64-bit. So we've been talking about a long time now. We used to have 32-bit processors, CPUs, and 64-bit processors, CPUs. 32-bit operating systems, 64-bit operating systems. We have been slowly on a migrating from 32-bit to 64-bit. So way back when with Windows XP, they had a 32-bit version of Windows XP, and then they did actually have a 64-bit version of Windows XP that nobody ever used. I only saw that once out in the wild. Nobody used the 64-bit. Then when they went to Vista, they had 32-bit versions and 64-bit versions. Sometimes you would see the 64-bit version, sometimes you would see the 32-bit version. They were out there. It was halvesies, which one you would find. Then when they went to Windows 7, you know, as they've been going, more and more, Windows 7 is almost always 64-bit now, but they do have a 32-bit version. Now, though, with Windows 2012 Server, there is no 32-bit version of it. It's only a 64-bit operating system. Why this is important is if you are using older hardware in order to try to run Windows Server 2012, if the processor in it is only a 32-bit processor, then it will not work. You shouldn't have a problem with that, though. It's been years. It's been years since they created processors that could only support 32-bit, but you may run into it. The other problem that you may run into is if you're dealing with software specifically written to only be 32-bit. Now, with the 64-bit operating systems, they do try to emulate, they try to make it so 32-bit software will work on them, but hey, you know, sometimes, it doesn't work how it's supposed to. A lot of techs, you guys know that sometimes there's 32-bit software that simply will not run on 64-bit machines, period. Why this is important for you guys once you start deploying Windows 2012 servers is you may have a lot of legacy applications. These are applications that may have been in your company or organization for a decade or more. Way back in the 90s, somebody created some really cool piece of software that frankly still does everything your company needs it to do, right? You're not thinking about replacing it because it does what you need it to do and you've already paid for it, so why should you buy something new and fancy? Well, the issue is if that software only runs on 32-bit machines, if you want to try to install it onto a Windows 2012 server, it won't work. So this may cause you a lot of problems. This is one of the reasons, once you start migrating servers, it's very important that you take an inventory of all the mission-critical applications and all the applications your company uses and make sure that they're going to work on the new server. But that's the only really huge, gotcha, is that it's only 64-bit. Only 64-bit. Now, when we're talking about the Windows servers, of course, Microsoft tries to make everything way too confusing so that they can squeeze more money out of you. And so one of the ways that they try to make things confusing is by coming up with multiple versions of the server operating system. So they used to have certain versions of Windows 2003, Windows 2008. Now they've come up with the new versions of Windows for Windows 2012. Basically, the four versions that you have to keep in mind when you're going to be using Windows Server 2012 is they have a data center version. So the data center version is for basically if you're running data centers, if you're going to be pushing a lot of data around. The big thing, the really nice thing with the data center version is that you can have unlimited virtual instances of operating systems using Hyper-V. So Hyper-V is Microsoft's virtualization solution. And so with the data center version of this server software, you can run unlimited instances on one particular piece of hardware. Well, if you go over to standard, you get basically all the functionality of the data center version, but it limits you for the number of instances of virtual servers you can run on that particular piece of hardware. So that's what you should look out for. Now, if you're going to be deploying, if you're going to be using Windows Server 2012 in the real world, generally you are going to be using the standard edition. Basically does everything you need except for a couple things, and if you need those couple things. Yeah. They do have two other versions though, but stay away, stay away. We may have classes on these other versions like later down the road, but for now, stay the hell away from these other two versions of Windows 2012 Server. It's the Essentials version and the Foundation version. The reason is that because these servers are made for small office, very small office environments, they are incredibly limited and they can just cause you all kinds of problems if you don't understand how to deploy a server so that it functions properly for a particular client. I think Foundation version is limited to like only 12 users, and Essentials version, I recall, is only limited to 25 users. So if you go out and you go, hey, look, Foundation version or Essentials version is a third the price of standard, I'm going to buy that for my client. Well, you buy that, you install that, and you find out you get a max of 25 users. That can run you into very, very big problems. So basically, with Windows Server 2012, just stay with the standard version for now. Once you know what's going on, once you're good at assessing what your client's needs are, then you might go for Essentials or Foundation. But just keep it out of your mind. I know it's less expensive, but there's a reason it's less expensive, and that's because Microsoft is screwing with you. Now, when you go to install Windows Server 2012, you're going to get a couple of options for installing it. The big ones that you're going to be looking for is it will give you the option for what is called Server Core or the GUI interface. Now, it's very important you understand the difference between those two interfaces. What Server Core means, this came out with Windows Server 2008, is that you get no GUI. You get no graphical user interface. You install the operating system under Server Core, and at the end of it, you get a blinking cursor. You get it's a PowerShell cursor. Basically, it blinks at you. Kind of like Linux, kind of like DOS. If you don't know what command to put in next, you're screwed. You just don't know what to do. So if you are an expert, if you just love the command line, then Server Core, you can do everything you need to do with Server Core. But for most of you guys, go with the GUI interface, the graphical user environment. It is just going to be far better for you, because if you go in there, like I say, Server Core is just going to be a pain in the butt, and for most of you guys, using the GUI interface will be absolutely a-okay. Now, you're going to be asking, Eli, why are you so excited about Windows Server 2012? You know, you're Eli, you've been around doing this crap since '96. Why is this stuff so cool? Well, the thing that I think makes Windows Server 2012 so cool is the functionality they add for data storage. So data is becoming the big new thing. In the past, you know, when Microsoft came out with Active Directory, they were worried about security. Then they came out, you know, with VPN and Exchange, and they were worried about communication. Right now, in 2013, what we are worried about is data storage. Being able to store data and being able to move data efficiently is becoming the big thing. More and more people are getting terabytes upon terabytes of data personally and in companies, and it's getting harder to manage. So I think the big thing that makes Windows Server 2012 stand out is the ability to store and move data in much more efficient ways. The first big thing that's really nice is something called self-healing Healing NTFS that is built into Windows Server 2012. What self-healing NTFS does is that it automatically basically does a scan disk routine all of the time to make sure your files don't get corrupted and to fix any corruptions that are found. So one of the big problems when you're dealing with servers, you're dealing with a lot of data, files get corrupted, partitions get corrupted, problems just happen with that data. You got to take the server offline, you got to run scan disk, that's going to take forever, especially when you've got terabytes upon terabytes of storage. It is just a pain, it's tedious, it's horrible all the way around. Well, with self-healing NTFS, the idea is that the server will continually be fixing those corruptions, so hopefully you won't have to run one of those horrible, nasty scan disk procedures again. Very good thing. The next thing that is really great is for Windows Server 2012 and with Windows 8 is the addition of SMB 3.0, server message blocks. This is the protocol that allows you to copy and paste and move files between computers and servers within the Windows world. So when you map a network drive in the Windows world and you paste a file or you copy a file or you delete a file or whatever, that is all done with SMB. SMB 3.0, the reason it's so good is that it can increase the file transfer rate between computers and servers 10 to 30 times faster than the old SMB 1 version that's in Windows XP. So this is a great thing. There's just added functionality, there's added security with SMB 3.0. It's one of those things you don't see, right? You can't configure SMB 3.0. You can't change anything about it. It's just one of those things that happens in the background, but it is really, really, really good. The one thing that you have to remember about SMB 3.0 is it only works with Windows Server 2012 and Windows 8 computers. It does not even work with Windows 7. Windows 7 uses something called SMB 2.1. So if you want to get the full functionality of SMB 3.0, you've got to go to the 2012 servers. Again, as I talk about, in the business world, time is money, right? Whenever you get a consultant or whenever you're paying for a high-level technician, you have to figure they're essentially billing you at $100 an hour. They're billing you at $100 an hour, whether they're sitting there and typing in a lot of configurations and doing stuff that makes sweat come down their forehead, but they're also billing you $100 an hour when they hit copy, paste, and then they just sit there and sip coffee as they watch the files get transferred from one server to another. They're getting paid $100 an hour at least, to sip coffee and watch files get transferred. So if you can increase the speed of file transfer 10 to 30 times, that really, I swear to you, is really worth the money. The next thing that goes along very nicely with the SMB is they also now build in data deduplication. So data deduplication has been around a while now, but this is a great feature of the Windows Server 2012 series. What data deduplication does is, you know how a lot of people basically have the exact same files that they're storing, but it takes up the same amount of space. So if you have one person with an iTunes directory that essentially has the exact same files as somebody else with an iTunes directory, if both those people copy their iTunes directory onto a server, it's going to take up a huge amount of space because you have two entirely separate iTunes directories, although they're basically the same. So this person has 200 songs, and this person has 200 songs, and 150 of the songs are exactly the same, only 50 are different. Well, normally, before data deduplication, that means you would have a folder with all 200 songs here, and you would have a folder with all 200 songs here, and that would take up a lot of space on the hard drive. With data deduplication, what is really cool is the server looks and goes, okay, these two files are identical, so I only need to create one copy of the file, and then we'll just link it to both folders to make it look like there are two copies. So basically, if you have two people and they have iTunes directories, now instead of having 400 songs individually stored in the folder, you may be able to get it down to being only 200 or 250. The reason is because it deduplicates the duplicate files. If the server sees that there are duplicate files, it simply deletes one, and then both people have a pointer to the one file that they have. So deduplication is absolutely awesome. And again, in this world where we're dealing with storage, it's a very important thing that you have to worry about. The next thing that's great, again, absolutely awesome, is something called storage spaces. So storage spaces is an implementation of a storage area network, a SAN for Microsoft. And what this allows you to do is it basically allows you to use network storage like RAID configurations. So you know on your computer, a normal desktop computer or server, you can configure RAID. So that's where you link multiple hard drives to create one logical hard drive. Well, now you can do that over multiple physical servers. So you can set up one server and you can set up storage spaces, and then if all the hard drive space on that one server runs out, you can set up another physical server and literally add hard drive space using that other physical server. You can also do it to have redundancy. So you could have 5 physical servers that store the data, and then you could have 2 redundant servers. So if one of the 5 fails, all of your data stays there. Why this is really good, again, now with this modern world, as data keeps increasing, you may start out with a server, you may put, let's say, 4 terabytes of storage on it. Well, then you run out of 4 terabytes of storage. You can just go buy another server with 5 terabytes of storage and add it into one of these storage spaces. And then you can add another, and you can add another, and you can add another. The nice part with this, just like with hypervisor virtualization, is that if one of the physical server dies, your data is still available to everybody on the network. Depending on how you set it up, if 2 servers die, your data is still available to everybody on the network. So your data is no longer concretely linked to hardware. It goes into one of these storage spaces. And again, if a server dies, hey, it's no big deal. Just go out, grab another server, plug it in, redo the storage spaces, and you're good to go. With the whole storage spaces, HyperV. So HyperV is Microsoft's version of virtualization that is still built into Windows Server 2012. And again, there's a lot more functionality with it now than even back with 2008. The final thing that I like, that I think should be impressive for you guys using Windows Server 2012 is offline domain join. So this is the one thing outside of the storage area that I just think is bee's knees, right? So the problem is you as a technician, if you're going out and you're building new computers that are going to be part of a domain, normally in order to connect them to the domain, you actually have to plug them in, you have to type in the administrator password, you have to join them to the domain. This, 1, is a real pain in the butt, and 2, can be very difficult if you're sending the computers out to site offices. So if you're sending computers out to remote offices, having to manually sit down and add computers to a domain can be a real pain in the butt. The nice thing with offline domain join is you can actually add the computer to the server, and then you can send a little USB stick to whoever is going to be adding the computer to the domain. They can run a routine, and that will be able to add the computer to the domain even when it's offline, even when it's not connected to the network. That can make life a lot easier. So these are some of the things that I think is really awesome and great about Windows Server 2012, and they are things that you should be thinking about for deploying into your environment. Even though it's going to cost a little bit of money, again, remember, we are supporting the business. The idea is, even if it does cost a little bit of money for Windows Server 2012, hopefully it will make the company more money than it's costing them. But before I end this, I do want to show you, just so I can show you the user interface and show you just kind of like what a pain in the butt Windows Server 2012 can be, just before you actually run into it in the real world, and then you're sitting there going, oh, what is this? So right now, we're sitting and we're looking at my Windows 7 computer. So the reason I want to show you this on the Windows 7 computer right now is I have Chrome opened and I want to show you that this is the free trial that you can download for Windows Server 2012. So if you decide to use one, you want to start playing with it, you can come here and you can actually download the ISO or the virtual hard drive for free. You can use these for 180 days, multiple times, create big networks, so on and so forth. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down and open up my remote desktop connection, and this opens up into my server. So this is a 2012 server. Now, this is where the user interface gets all kind of hinky and weird and is just a pain in the butt. So right here, this is the server manager interface. So this is the interface you can go in and you can do a lot of things. It gives you a lot of information. You can manage, you can have tools, so on and so forth. So this is one of the places that you're going to be using to manage your server. Well, if we exit out of this, basically we're going to look and see what looks like the desktop environment. But again, just like Windows 8, there is no start menu. Well, one of the things you can do is if you go down, just like with Windows 8, into the lower right-hand corner and hover, you will get a little start brick like that. Now with this, if you click on that, you will go to the start screen. It looks like the Metro interface, or you can right-click and then it will give you some other functions and features. So again, this is kind of weird, and it's like, really? This is a server? This is a horrible interface. So that's one of the things you can do. Then, just like with Windows 8, if you go up into the right-hand corner and hover, you'll get the search feature and functions and all that, and the start menu. So we've got that. Well, if we want to go, we can click the little Windows button, and that will take us over to the Metro style interface. From here, you have the things like Server Manager and Computer and all that. If we right click, we can see the All Apps thing comes up, and then we can click on the All Apps, and again we go in, and this looks like Windows 8 again. Oh, it's so. Basically what I would say, the main thing that you're going to need for using Windows Server 2012 is just do the search. So like if you need device drivers, or you need to worry about the devices for the server, we can click on device, we can hit search. We're going to notice here, it'll say under apps there's nothing, under files there is nothing, but under settings, this is where we can go and we can try to find whatever utility it is we need. So if we need device manager, I can now click on device manager and it will open it up, and now you'll get a pretty normal device manager interface. So there's a lot more to Windows 2012, but I just kind of wanted to show you so that when you open this thing up and you're like, what the hell? Well, you at least have been warned, as they say. Now, once you get into the actual utilities of Windows Server 2012, they look basically the same way like they've looked since Windows 2000. Again, Device Manager looks the same, Control Panel, a lot of things, these things look the same, but actually trying to access them can be a royal pain in the butt. I would say just use the search function. I will give Microsoft that. The search function really does work very well. So if you don't know where Control Panel is, or you don't know where Add Remove Programs is, just type in the search and it should pop up. And hopefully, hopefully you'll be able to figure out what to do past that. So this whole track, this Windows Server 2012 track, is going to be a number of different classes. And so basically, just like with my other tracks, we are going to be building up to teach you how to do different things. So I'm going to be showing you how to install Windows Server 2012. I'm going to be showing you how to install Active Directory, DNS, DHCP, VPN, storage spaces, a lot of this other stuff I will be showing you how to do. This is simply the introductory class to get you comfortable with the server operating system. Again, just like everything, as I always say, it only seems complicated when you look at it for the first time. Once you get an idea of what's supposed to happen, it's just another operating system. It's just another thing you've got to muddle through and figure out. The big thing is you have to figure out what do you want to do, what do you actually want to accomplish, and then you figure out how to accomplish it, and then it's pretty simple. like I say, I've been working with server operating systems for a long time now. Oh, Microsoft just has a tendency to make everything look horrible and evil the first time you use it, and 2 months from now it'll seem like old hat, and you'll just be whizzing through it. It's really no big deal. The big thing, again, what I want to remind you is that there's only 64-bit version of Windows Server 2012. So again, those legacy applications, this is not something that you should overlook. This may really cause you problems in the future. Then again, as I say, when you're playing with this, use the standard edition of Windows Server 2012, because that is the version that will give you all the functionality that you need and is the one that you're generally going to be running into in the real world. There is the Essentials version and there is a Foundation version, but I'm warning you, don't use them. Again, in the future, you can use them to your heart's content. But right now, just because they are less expensive, that does not mean that you should go out and buy it, because they are in fact handicapped. You can go out, you can get the trial version of Windows Server 2012, 180-day version. Again, that is not handicapped in the least. It will do everything you need it to do. You can build a massive 300 server lab if you wanted to off of that software. So just use that for what you're going to be doing for your lab environment. And then finally, again, as I say, the study book, what I go by essentially is Windows Server 2012 Unleashed by Sam's. Go to Barnes & Noble, or go to Amazon. At Barnes & Noble, it costs $60. It's well worth it. It's a good, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches of material. There's a lot of stuff in here, so no matter how much information I go over in this track, there is going to be more to learn. So I would say go out, buy this book. I don't get any money for telling you that, but you really should. So yeah. So, as you know, I am Eli the Computer Guy. This was Introduction to Windows Server 2012. It's a really cool operating system. Again, being a tech, having been around for a while, there's a lot of cool functionality in here that will be really great for you to use and to deploy into the real world. Again, I know a lot of you guys, you're all like open source and Linux, and you don't want to pay a dime for an operating system, and I'm not telling you you have to. But again, remember, in the real world, time is money. People pay consultants at least $100 an hour. So $600 for a server operating system really is not as expensive in a business environment as you may think. That free Linux operating system may end up costing the company a whole hell of a lot more money. So just be careful about that and just have that in mind. Again, this I really do think is worth the money once you get past the abysmal, horrible, evil, tedious user interface. So, I enjoyed teaching this class and look forward to seeing you at the next one.